What if I told you that one small dime in your pocket could be worth far more than just 10 cents? Welcome back to USA Coin History, the channel where we uncover the hidden history, fascinating stories, rare errors, and incredible values behind America's most collectible coins. Today, we're beginning an exciting series featuring the 1975, 1985, 1986, 1987, and 2001 Roosevelt Dimes. Most people have seen these coins, spent them, or ignored them without a second thought. But some of these dimes have surprising varieties, minting errors, historical significance, and collector demand that could make them worth hundreds, thousands, or even much more under the right conditions. In this series, we'll explore how each coin was made, why it was minted, the history behind its design, rare mint errors, key dates, grading tips, real auction sales, and how to identify valuable examples that might still be hiding in everyday circulation. So before you spend another Roosevelt dime, watch this series carefully. You might discover that an ordinary-looking coin is actually an extraordinary piece of American history. Now, let's begin with today's Roosevelt dime and uncover the story that millions of people have never heard. The year was 1975. America was preparing to celebrate its 200th anniversary. Inflation was affecting everyday life, and millions of Americans carried Roosevelt dimes in their pockets without giving them a second thought. But decades later, coin collectors began looking at these tiny coins much more closely, and they discovered that some 1975 dimes were far more interesting than anyone had imagined. The Roosevelt dime itself has a remarkable history. It first appeared in 1946 to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt, whose leadership during the Great Depression and World War II left a lasting impact on the United States. Roosevelt also helped inspire the March of Dimes campaign to fight polio, making the dime a fitting tribute after his death. By 1975, the Roosevelt dime had already become one of the most recognizable coins in America. It was struck from a copper core with a cypronical outer layer, measuring 17.91 millimeters, weighing 2.268 grams, and featuring a reeded edge with 118 reeds. Although it looks similar to earlier dimes, every detail was carefully engineered for durability and everyday circulation. On the obverse, you'll find Roosevelt's portrait, designed by John R. Sinek. Around the portrait are the inscriptions "Liberty, in God We Trust," and the date 1975. On the reverse, a torch stands between an olive branch and an oak branch, representing liberty, peace, and strength values that continue to define the spirit of the United States. Millions of these coins were produced at the Philadelphia Mint, which carries no mint mark, and at the Denver Mint, identified by the small d mint mark. Together, these mints produced hundreds of millions of dimes, making the 1975 Roosevelt dime seem extremely common. But appearances can be deceiving. Among these ordinary-looking coins are a few remarkable pieces that have captured the attention of collectors around the world. Tiny differences in strike quality, minting mistakes, and condition can dramatically change a coin's value. In fact, some examples have sold for prices that surprise even experienced collectors. I will uncover the rare varieties, famous mint errors, valuable grading details, and the extraordinary 1975 dime that became one of the most sought-after modern U.S. coins. Stay tuned, you won't want to miss what comes next. If you think the most valuable 1975 Roosevelt dime can be identified in just a few seconds, think again. Professional collectors often spend hours examining a single coin because the smallest detail can completely change its value. The first thing experts examine is the surface of the coin. A genuine mint-state Roosevelt dime should still display its original mint luster of bright, cartwheel-like shine created when the coin was first struck. Once this luster is worn away through circulation, the coin's value usually drops significantly. Next comes the strike quality. Although millions of 1975 dimes were produced, not all were struck with the same precision. Some coins show sharp, well-defined details in Roosevelt's hair, ear, and jawline, while others appear softer due to worn dies or lower striking pressure. Collectors are willing to pay much more for coins with crisp, fully struck details. One of the most important features is found on the reverse of the coin, the torch bands. On exceptionally well-struck coins, the horizontal bands across the torch are clearly separated. These are known as full bands FB coins. Because achieving full bands requires an outstanding strike, they are much scarcer than ordinary circulation pieces. Condition is another major factor. Professional grading companies, such as PCGs and NGC, use the mint state scale from 1/1000s to 60 to MS70. As the grade increases, the number of surviving coins decreases dramatically. A 1975 Roosevelt Dime graded MS67 or higher can command a substantial premium, especially if it also has full bands. Collectors also inspect the edges, lettering, and date under magnification. They look for doubled letters, die cracks, die chips, clipped planchettes, off-center strikes, and other genuine mint-made errors. These mistakes occurred during production at the U.S. Mint and can make an otherwise common coin much more desirable. However, it is equally important to distinguish a true mint error from ordinary damage. Scratches, corrosion, cleaning marks, filing, or post-mint damage may make a coin look unusual, but they rarely increase its value. Learning this difference is one of the most valuable skills a collector can develop. This is why experienced collectors never rush. Every Roosevelt Dime deserves a careful inspection, because one tiny detail can transform an everyday coin into a collector's prize. And the story of the 1975 Roosevelt Dime is still not over. There are even more fascinating facts about surviving populations, auction records, and collector demand that we'll uncover as our journey through America's Dimes continues.
कॉर्ड काफ़ी सारी पुरानी है ये तो मशीन ही है कॉर्ड काफ़ी प्यार की सही उन्होंने ट्यूब चाहिए बर्दे पास तो ना क्रीम चाहिए कॉफ़ी चाहिए थोड़ा तो
As we continue our journey through America's most fascinating dimes, we arrive at another coin that millions of people have carried in their pockets without realizing its story. The 1985 Roosevelt Dime. At first glance, it looks almost identical to every other Roosevelt Dime. The same familiar portrait, the same torch on the reverse, and the same 10-cent value. But behind this small coin lies another chapter in the history of the United States Mint and the American economy. The year 1985 was an important time in the United States. The country was experiencing rapid economic growth, new technology was changing everyday life, and cash transactions remained the primary way. Americans paid for goods and services. Every day, millions of dimes changed hands in grocery stores, gas stations, restaurants, and banks. To keep up with this demand, the United States Mint produced hundreds of millions of Roosevelt Dimes during the year. Most were struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which carries no mint mark, while others were produced at the Denver Mint, identified by the small D mint mark located above the date. Although these coins were made for circulation, every one of them still had to meet strict quality standards. Each 1985 Roosevelt Dime was struck on a copper core clad with cupronickel, giving it the familiar silver appearance. The coin weighs 2.268 grams, measures 17.91 millimeters in diameter, and features a finely reeded edge. The design remained one of the most recognizable in American history. On the front is President Franklin D. Roosevelt, whose leadership during the Great Depression and World War II changed the nation forever. His portrait, designed by John R. Sinnock, has appeared on the dime since 1946. The reverse continues to display the famous torch, symbolizing liberty, placed between an olive branch, representing peace, and an oak branch, representing strength and independence. These symbols have remained unchanged for decades, making the Roosevelt Dime one of America's longest-running coin designs. To most Americans in 1985, this was simply another everyday coin worth 10 cents. People spent it without hesitation, children collected them in piggy banks, and businesses counted them by the thousands every day. But time has a way of changing ordinary objects into collectibles. As years passed, many 1985 dimes became worn, damaged, or disappeared from circulation altogether. Meanwhile, collectors began searching for the finest surviving examples coins, with brilliant luster, sharp strikes, and outstanding preservation. They also started discovering unusual mint errors and varieties that made certain 1985 dimes much more desirable than others. Today, collectors carefully inspect every 1985 Roosevelt dime they find, hoping to uncover a rare example that stands out from the millions produced during that year, and this is only the beginning. The deeper you explore the world of coin collecting, the more you realize that every Roosevelt dime has a story waiting to be discovered. The 1985 Roosevelt dime is no exception. Even though millions were produced, only a very small percentage have survived in the condition that serious collectors are searching for today. One of the biggest mistakes new collectors make is judging a coin by its age alone. Many people believe that if a coin is old, it must automatically be valuable. In reality, professional collectors focus on three things above all else: condition, rarity, and demand. When these three factors come together, the value of a coin can increase dramatically. If you own a 1985 Roosevelt dime, begin by checking the mint mark. A coin with no mint mark was struck at Philadelphia, while a coin with a demint mark came from Denver. Then examine the coin under a bright light or with a magnifying glass. Look carefully at Roosevelt's portrait, the lettering, the date, and especially the reverse torch. A coin that still has brilliant mint luster, sharp details, and no signs of heavy wear has a much better chance of attracting collector interest. The torch bands should also be clear and fully separated. Coins with the full bands, FB, designation are especially desirable because they represent the highest quality. Strikes produced by the mint. Collectors should also watch for genuine mint-made errors such as off-center strikes, die cracks, clipped planchettes, and other production mistakes. However, it is important to remember that scratches, dents, corrosion, cleaning marks, or damage caused after the coin entered circulation are not considered valuable mint errors. Many of the finest 1985 Roosevelt dimes have been preserved for decades in coin albums, mint sets, or protective holders. These carefully stored coins often retain their original brilliance and are the ones most likely to receive high grades from professional grading services. The fascinating part of coin collecting is that valuable discoveries can still happen today. Every time someone opens an old coin jar, a forgotten piggy bank, or a family collection, there is always the possibility of finding a remarkable coin hiding among ordinary pocket change. The 1985 Roosevelt dime reminds us that history is not always found in museums. Sometimes it is found in the smallest coins we carry every day without noticing. But our journey through America's Roosevelt dimes is far from over. As we move to the 1986 Roosevelt dime, we'll discover another chapter filled with new mintages, interesting production details, collector favorites, valuable full bands examples, rare mint errors, and surprising auction results. At first glance, it may look almost identical to the 1985 issue, but as you'll soon see, every year has its own unique story waiting to be uncovered. Our journey now brings us to the 1986 Roosevelt dime, another coin that quietly entered circulation and became part of millions of everyday transactions across the United States. To most Americans, it was simply another 10-cent coin. Few could have imagined that decades later collectors would study this very coin in search of rare varieties, exceptional quality, and hidden value. The year 1986 marked another important chapter in the history of the United States Mint. The American economy was growing. Businesses were expanding and billions of coins were needed to keep commerce moving. Among those coins was the Roosevelt Dime, a small piece of American history that carried the same timeless design introduced in 1946. Although the design remained unchanged, every production year tells a different story. Each year had its own mintages, striking quality, collector demand, and unique characteristics. That is why collectors never treat all Roosevelt Dimes the same. The 1986 Roosevelt Dime was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which carries no mint mark, and the Denver Mint, identified by the small D mint mark above the date. Special proof versions were also produced at the San Francisco Mint with the S mint mark for collectors. Like other Roosevelt Dimes of the era, it was struck on a copper core with outer layers of cuprincle, weighed 2.268 grams, measured 17.91 millimeters, and featured a finely reeded edge. These specifications made it durable enough for everyday circulation while preserving the classic appearance Americans had known for decades. At first glance, the 1986 dime may seem ordinary, but as we'll soon discover, its production, preservation, and collector interest make it another fascinating chapter in the story of America's modern coinage. As collectors continued examining the 1986 Roosevelt dime, they discovered something that is true for almost every modern U.S. coin. The number of coins minted does not always determine their value. Instead, the condition of the coin, the quality of the strike, and the presence of genuine mint errors often make the biggest difference. During 1986, the United States Mint produced hundreds of millions of Roosevelt dimes for circulation. Most entered everyday commerce almost immediately, passing through countless hands in banks, stores, restaurants, and vending machines. Because of this heavy circulation, many examples quickly developed scratches, worn details, and faded luster. For collectors today, those heavily circulated coins are common. The real challenge is finding a 1986 Roosevelt dime that still looks almost exactly as it did on the day it left the mint. Professional collectors begin by examining the coin's original mint luster. Under proper lighting, an uncirculated dime displays a bright rotating shine, often called the cartwheel effect. This original brilliance is one of the first signs that a coin may deserve closer inspection. The next feature is the strike itself. Not every 1986 dime was struck with equal pressure. Some coins show soft details in Roosevelt's hair or on the reverse torch, while others display remarkably sharp designs. These well-struck examples are much more desirable among collectors. One of the most important characteristics experts look for is the full bands, FB, designation. On the reverse of the coin, the horizontal bands across the torch must appear fully separated and clearly defined. Only the finest strikes receive this designation, making them considerably scarcer than ordinary circulation pieces. Collectors also search for authentic mint-made errors. Although major errors are uncommon, they do exist. Some of the varieties that attract attention include off-center strikes, die cracks, die chips, clipped planchettes, broad strikes, double die varieties, filled dies, minor strike-through errors. Whenever one of these errors is confirmed by a professional grading service, the coin often becomes much more desirable than an ordinary example. Another important lesson in coin collecting is knowing the difference between a mint error and post-mint damage. Damage caused after the coin entered circulation, such as scratches, cleaning, corrosion, dents, or environmental wear, normally does not increase its value. Genuine mint errors occur during the manufacturing process at the United States Mint. This careful attention to detail is what makes coin collecting so exciting. A coin that looks completely ordinary at first glance can reveal something extraordinary after a closer inspection. And that possibility keeps collectors searching through rolls of coins and old collections every single day. Our journey through the Roosevelt Dime series now reaches 1987, a year that added another important chapter to the history of America's 10-cent coin. While millions of these dimes entered circulation, very few people stopped to think about where they came from or the story they carried. In 1987, the United States was experiencing economic growth, and cash remained the foundation of everyday commerce. Every morning, banks distributed fresh rolls of coins to businesses across the country. Those coins were used to buy coffee, newspapers, groceries, and countless other everyday items. Among them was the 1987 Roosevelt Dime, quietly passing from one hand to another without attracting much attention. Like previous years, the United States Mint struck these dimes for daily circulation at the Philadelphia Mint, which produced coins without a mint mark, and the Denver Mint, where coins received the small D mint mark above the date. At the same time, beautifully polished, proof dimes bearing the S mint mark were produced at the San Francisco Mint specifically for collectors. The coin itself continued the design Americans had known for more than 4 decades. The obverse features President Franklin D. Roosevelt, whose leadership, during some of the nation's most difficult years, earned him a permanent place in American history. His portrait, designed by John R. Sinnock, had appeared on the dime since 1946. On the reverse, the familiar torch stands proudly between an olive branch and an oak branch, symbolizing liberty, peace, and strength. Although the design remained unchanged, every new year of production brought slight differences in strike quality, die life, and preservation details that collectors study with great care today. The 1987 Roosevelt Dime was struck on a copper core clad with cupronickel, weighed 2.268 grams, measured 17.91 millimeters, and featured a finely reeded edge. These specifications had become the standard for the modern Roosevelt dime. At the time, no one imagined that. Decades later, collectors would search through thousands of coins, hoping to find one exceptional 1987 dime with perfect surfaces, outstanding strike quality, or a rare mint error. And that is exactly where the story becomes even more interesting, because not every 1987 Roosevelt dime is remembered in the same way. Some have become far more desirable than others, and the reasons behind that will surprise many collectors. The next chapter takes us deeper into the world of the 1987 Roosevelt dime, where we'll explore its collector demand, strike quality, mint errors, and the characteristics that separate an ordinary dime from one that deserves a place in a serious coin collection. As the years passed, the 1987 Roosevelt dime slowly disappeared from everyday circulation. Millions of coins became scratched, worn, or damaged through daily use, while only a small number survived in the brilliant condition that collectors hope to find today. This is where the story takes an interesting turn. Although the 1987 Roosevelt dime is not considered a low mintage coin, finding one in superb uncirculated condition is much more difficult than many people expect. Collectors know that rarity is not always about how many coins were made, it is often about how many remain in exceptional condition decades later. The first detail experts examine is the coin's original mint luster. A genuine mint state coin should still display the bright, flowing shine created when it was struck at the United States Mint. If that original luster has been preserved, the coin immediately becomes much more attractive to collectors. Next comes the quality of the strike. On many circulation coins, fine details became weak as dies wore down during production. However, a sharply struck 1987 Roosevelt dime reveals crisp lettering, a detailed portrait of President Roosevelt, and a beautifully defined reverse design. One of the most desirable features is the full band's FB designation. On the reverse of the dime, the horizontal bands around the center of the torch must be fully separated, with no blending between them. Coins meeting this strict standard are much scarcer and are highly sought after by advanced collectors. Collectors also search carefully for genuine mint-made errors. Some of the varieties that attract attention include off-center strikes, die cracks, die chips, clipped planchettes, broad strikes, filled dies, strike-through errors, double die varieties. Although these errors are uncommon, Authenticated examples often attract strong interest because every mint error tells the story of a unique moment during the coin's production. Professional grading also plays a major role in determining value. Organizations such as PCGs and NGC evaluate coins on the mint state scale, and even a 1-point difference in grade can significantly affect a coin's market value. Hay grade 1987 Roosevelt Dimes with full bands are especially prized because they are far more difficult to find than ordinary circulation pieces. The deeper collectors study this coin, the more they realize that every tiny detail matters. What appears to be an ordinary 10-cent coin can become an exciting discovery when examined with patience and knowledge. And there's still more to uncover as we continue exploring the fascinating story of the 1987 Roosevelt Dime before moving on to the next remarkable chapter in the Roosevelt Dime series. As the calendar turned to the 21st century, the Roosevelt Dime entered a new era. The year 2001 was more than just another date on a coin. It marked the beginning of a century that would change the world in many ways. Yet despite all the technological advances taking place, one small 10-cent coin continued to pass quietly through the hands of millions of Americans every single day. By 2001, the Roosevelt Dime had already been part of American life for 55 years. It had witnessed generations grow up, economic changes, and countless historic events. Even though its design remained familiar, every new year added another chapter to its remarkable history. The 2001 Roosevelt Dime was struck at two major facilities of the United States. Mint coins produced in Philadelphia carried no mint mark, while those struck in Denver displayed the familiar D mint mark above the date. For collectors, beautifully polished proof dimes were also produced at the San Francisco Mint, identified by the S mint mark. Like the Roosevelt Dimes before it, the 2001 issue was struck on a copper core clad with cupronickel, weighed 2.268 grams, measured 17.91 millimeters, and featured a reeded edge. These specifications had become the standard for one of America's longest-running coin designs. The portrait of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, designed by John R. Sinnock, continued to symbolize leadership and determination. On the reverse, the torch stood proudly between the olive branch and the oak branch, representing liberty, peace, and strength values that remained at the heart of the coin's design. When these dimes first entered circulation, very few people imagined they would one day become collectible. Most were used to buy everyday necessities, dropped into vending machines, stored in piggy banks, or forgotten inside jars and drawers. But as the years passed, collectors began looking at the 2001 Roosevelt Dime more carefully. They realized that even modern coins can become desirable when they are preserved in outstanding condition or display unusual mint-made characteristics. Every Roosevelt Dime tells a different story, and the 2001 issue is no exception. Behind its ordinary appearance lies a fascinating journey through modern American coinage, collector interest, and the search for hidden treasures that may still be waiting to be discovered. In the next chapter, we'll explore why some 2001 Roosevelt Dimes attract collector attention, the mint errors experts search for, the importance of full bands, and how condition can transform an ordinary dime into a highly collectible coin. As our journey through the 2001 Roosevelt Dime comes to its final chapter, one thing becomes clear. A coin doesn't have to be centuries old to become an important collectible. Sometimes history is created 1 year at a time, and the 2001 Roosevelt Dime is a perfect example of that. Over the years, millions of these dimes have been spent, lost, damaged, or simply forgotten. Yet a small number have survived in outstanding condition, preserving the same brilliant luster and sharp details they had on the day they left the United States Mint. Those are the coins that collectors continue searching for today. Experienced collectors know that finding a valuable coin is not based on luck alone. It requires patience, knowledge, and careful observation. Every detail matters, from the coin's surface and strike quality to its mint mark and overall preservation. Even the smallest difference can separate an ordinary dime from one that deserves a place in a serious collection. One of the greatest attractions of the 2001 Roosevelt Dime is that it can still be found. Unlike many historic American coins that disappeared from circulation decades ago, 2001 dimes continue to appear in bank rolls, old piggy banks, family collections, and everyday pocket change. That means the opportunity to make an exciting discovery still exists. For new collectors, the 2001 Roosevelt Dime is an excellent reminder that every collection begins with a single coin. Learning how to recognize original mint luster, strong strike quality, full bands, and genuine mint errors builds the skills needed to identify more valuable coins in the future. The Roosevelt Dime series tells the story of America through one of its smallest coins. From 1975 to 2001, each year has offered its own history, its own challenges at the mint, and its own treasures for collectors to discover. Together, these coins remind us that even the smallest piece of pocket change can carry decades of history and become a lasting part of America's numismatic heritage. And although this chapter comes to an end, the search for rare and valuable coins never truly ends. Somewhere, another remarkable coin is waiting to be discovered, and its story is just beginning. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to USA Coins History for more amazing stories about rare and valuable American coins. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next coin discovery. Thank you for watching, and remember, before you spend your next coin, take a closer look. It could be worth a fortune.